All right, so there's this pond, just a simple, muddy flax pond in the French countryside, maybe 40 kilometers northeast of Paris. Nothing special about it, really. Farmers used it for retting flax fibers, breaking down the plant material in stagnant water. The locals called it a poc in the Picard dialect. Poc meaning pond, aline meaning flax. Say it fast enough, Poclain. Poclain. That name would end up on machines tearing open the earth from Argentina to Japan. But in 1927, it was just the name of a place near a family farm in Le Plessis-Belleville, France. The man standing there looking at that pond was Georges Bataille, not the famous writer, different guy entirely. This Georges Bataille was a farmer, a mechanic, an engineer of sorts, and he was tired of watching men and horses struggle with outdated equipment. On June 1st, 1927, Georges Bataille signed papers establishing something he called Bataille and Light Workshops. His partner's name was Light. Within a few years, it became Bataille and Son Workshops, and then just Poclain, the name of the pond, the name that stuck. The early years were humble. Tipping trailers, manure spreaders, agricultural equipment that helped farmers work a bit faster, hurt a bit less. Nothing revolutionary, just good, solid machinery for France rebuilding itself after the devastation of the Great War. But Georges Bataille wasn't satisfied with good enough. France in the 1930s and 40s was a country grinding through economic depression and then occupation. The Second World War turned Le Plessis-Belleville into just another small town under German control. Production slowed, innovation stopped, survival became the only goal. When the war ended in 1945, France faced a massive rebuilding effort. Roads, bridges, buildings, infrastructure destroyed by years of conflict needed to be reconstructed and fast. But the equipment available was primitive. Cable-operated excavators dating back to the late 1800s, steam shovels, machines that required massive crews, constant maintenance, and still moved dirt at a pace that felt almost medieval. Georges Bataille saw the problem clearly. The existing excavators used winches and cables, mechanical systems that transferred power through steel ropes running over pulleys and drums. Every movement required a separate winch. Swing left, one winch. Dig down, another winch. Lift the bucket, a third winch. The systems were complex, unreliable, and brutally inefficient. And then, in 1948, Georges Bataille made a decision that would change everything. He bought a Dodge 4x4 military surplus chassis. Nothing fancy, just a rugged American truck left behind after the war. He stripped off the bed and built a loading unit on the back. Hydraulic cylinders controlled the boom and bucket. Small, simple, but it worked. The hydraulic principle itself wasn't new. Pascal had figured out the math in the 1600s, but applying it to excavation equipment in a practical, commercial way, that was different. That was revolutionary. The machine worked, customers bought it, and Georges Bataille realized he wasn't in the agricultural equipment business anymore. By 1949, design work began on something much more ambitious, a fully hydraulic excavator. Not a hybrid, not a compromise, a machine where every function, swing, boom, stick, bucket, was controlled by hydraulic power. October 1951. The Agricultural Machinery Show in France. Georges Bataille and his sons Pierre and Claude unveiled the TU, the first fully hydraulic excavator ever built. The machine sat on a two-wheeled trailer. You tow it behind a tractor. The tractor's power takeoff drove a hydraulic pump. That pump sent pressurized oil through hoses to cylinders that moved the boom and bucket. The whole upper structure could rotate, but only part way, maybe 180 degrees. Limited slew, they called it. It was slow. It was awkward. It couldn't compete with the big cable excavators in terms of raw digging force. And contractors bought more than 1,000 of them. Because the TU did something the cable machines couldn't. It was simple. One man could operate it. Repairs were straightforward. And hydraulic systems, they were smooth, precise. You could place a bucket exactly where you wanted it, not just haul it around with a winch and hope for the best. Other manufacturers noticed. British company JCB had experimented with hydraulics in 1947.
German firms were developing their own designs, but Poclain, they were selling them, building them in volume, refining the concept with every machine that left the factory. By 1956, the TU evolved into the TO model. Better hydraulics, stronger frame, more digging force. Sales continued climbing. 400 units sold by 1961. The German market opened up. International distribution networks formed. Georges Bataille was getting older. His sons, Pierre and Claude, were taking on more responsibility, running the business, pushing the engineering forward. And they both understood something their father had grasped back in that field in 1948. Hydraulics wasn't just about excavators. Hydraulics was about power transfer, torque, motion, control. And if you could master hydraulics, if you could build components that were reliable, efficient, powerful, you could build anything. Claude Bataille was the younger son, the engineer, the one who spent hours in the workshop, sketching designs, testing prototypes, solving problems that nobody else had even identified yet. And in 1958, Claude Bataille invented something that would become more important than any single excavator Poclain ever built: the G0 hydraulic motor.
The G0 didn't look like much. A steel housing, maybe the size of a car wheel. Inside, a shaft surrounded by pistons arranged radially, like spokes on a wheel. You pump high-pressure hydraulic oil in, the pistons push against a cam ring, the shaft rotates. Torque comes out. Simple concept, brutally difficult to execute properly. Every hydraulic motor before the G0 had problems. They leaked, they wore out fast, they couldn't handle high torque at low speeds. You could make them spin fast with low power or slow with low power, but high torque at low speeds, that's what you needed for excavators, for anything digging into the earth. Claude Bataille's G0 solved it. The radial piston design distributed forces evenly. The cam lobe technology, that was the secret. The shape of the cam ring determined how the pistons moved. Get that shape right, and you could generate massive torque without destroying the motor in a few hundred hours. And Poclain got it right. The G0 went into production. Poclain excavators got better, stronger, more reliable, but more importantly, other manufacturers wanted those motors. Industrial equipment makers, mobile crane companies, anyone building machines that needed high torque in a compact package. By 1962, Poclain developed the G1. Bigger, more powerful, different sizes for different applications, slewing drives for excavator rotation, ground drives for tracked machines. The hydraulics division wasn't just supporting excavator production anymore, it was becoming its own business. But the excavators, those were still the stars. 1961, the TY-45 launches. This machine, you have to understand how strange this thing looked. The upper structure was normal enough: boom, stick, bucket, operator's cab, but the undercarriage? 3 wheels. Not 4, not tracks. 3 wheels arranged in a triangle. 2 small steering wheels up front, 2 big drive wheels in the back, powered by, you guessed it, a Poclain hydraulic motor. The entire upper structure rotated a full 360 degrees, complete rotation. You could dig on one side, spin around, dump on the other, spin back, and keep digging. No repositioning the whole machine. No tracks to wear out. Engineers from other companies looked at it and thought Poclain had lost their minds. Contractors looked at it and bought them. 30,000 units over 21 years of production. 30,000. The TY-45 became the most successful excavator model Poclain ever built. It worked on city streets without tearing up pavement. It fit into tight spaces. And that 3-wheel design, it was weird, but it worked. The machine was stable. The hydraulic drive system made it maneuverable, and operators loved it. Pierre Bataille, the older brother, was running the company by 1967. His father, George, was still around, still advising, but Pierre was making the decisions now. And Pierre understood something crucial about business: diversification. 1965, Poclain creates PPM, Poclain Potain Materials, a joint venture to build mobile cranes. Same hydraulic technology, different application, new market.
1966, the G1 motor gets bigger, more powerful. The 100 G1 goes into the LY and LC 80 excavators. Poclain's excavators are getting larger, 20-ton class machines, and they need more hydraulic power to run them. 1967, Poclain releases the GY120, the first all-wheel hydrostatic excavator. Every wheel driven by hydraulic motors, no mechanical transmission, just oil pressure and torque. 1968, Pierre Bataille establishes the hydraulic division as a separate entity, a new factory in Verberie, France, dedicated to making hydraulic components, not excavators, just the motors, pumps, valves, the pieces other companies needed. International expansion accelerated, licensing agreements with Japan, manufacturing in Argentina, Czechoslovakia, India, South Korea, subsidiaries in Brazil and Mexico, distribution networks covering 80 countries. By 1970, Poclain employed over 10,000 people. 10,000 people! From that farm near a flax pond to a global industrial powerhouse in 43 years. But Pierre Bataille wasn't satisfied. Poclain had conquered the small and medium excavator markets. The TY-45 was everywhere, but large mining excavators? That market was dominated by American manufacturers, Bucyrus, Marion, massive cable machines that could move mountains. Poclain needed something big, something that would prove hydraulics could scale at any scale. 1970, Poclain announced the EC1000, 900 horsepower, 125 metric tons, operating weight, the largest hydraulic excavator in the world. 3 engines, not 1, 3, either 3 Deutsch F12 L133 diesel engines at 370 horsepower each, or 3 Detroit diesel 8V71s at 268 horsepower each. 900 horsepower total, give or take. All that power drove hydraulic pumps. The pumps sent oil to massive Poclain hydraulic motors, motors that could generate the torque needed to swing a 100-ton machine smoothly, to lift a 10 cubic yard bucket loaded with rock. The EC1000 could work as a face shovel, digging upward into a rock face, or as a backhoe, digging downward into a pit. Bucket capacity ranged from 5 to nearly 9 cubic meters, depending on configuration and material density. Mining companies in Europe and Africa bought them, coal operations in the UK, open pit mines on 3 continents. The EC1000 proved that hydraulics could scale, that Poclain wasn't just making city excavators anymore. That same year, 1970, Poclain won the Grand Prix Hors Concours de l'Oscar de l'Exportation, basically the French government's highest award for export achievement. Poclain machines were operating in over 180 countries. Le Plessis-Belleville became famous, the little town northeast of Paris where they built the excavators that conquered the world. 2,000 people worked there every day. The Central Service and Spare Parts Division employed hundreds more. Pierre Bataille was proving himself a capable leader. Expansion, diversification, innovation. The company was growing so fast that staying ahead of demand meant constantly building new factories, hiring more workers, securing more suppliers. In 1973, Poclain manufactured and sold 4,869 excavators worldwide. Nearly 2,000 more were produced under license in Japan, Argentina, Czechoslovakia, India, and South Korea. Since 1951, Poclain had built over 51,000 excavators. And then, the world changed.
October 1973. The Yom Kippur War breaks out in the Middle East. Israel against Egypt and Syria. The fighting lasts less than 21 weeks. The consequences lasted years. The Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, imposed an oil embargo on countries supporting Israel: the United States, Canada, Japan, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom. Oil prices quadrupled in a matter of months. Not doubled, quadrupled. France wasn't directly embargoed, but global oil prices affected everyone. The price of diesel fuel, hydraulic oil, steel, transportation,
Everything Poclain needed to build excavators shot upward. But that was just the beginning. The embargo triggered a global recession. Construction projects got canceled, mining operations scaled back, infrastructure spending dried up. Companies that had ordered excavators suddenly couldn't afford them or didn't need them anymore because their projects had been shelved. Poclain's order books started thinning. By 1974, the situation was getting serious. The French economy was struggling, unemployment was rising, inflation was raging. Industrial companies faced a brutal choice: cut costs or face bankruptcy. Pierre Bataille looked at the numbers: 10,000 employees, factories across Europe and South America, massive overhead, and revenues dropping month by month. He needed to lay people off, not a few dozen, hundreds, maybe thousands. Restructure the company, sell off non-core assets, do whatever was necessary to survive until the economy recovered. But the French government said no. You have to understand, France in the 1970s had strong labor protections. The government could block layoffs. They could prevent companies from shedding workers during economic downturns. The goal was protecting employment. The unintended consequence: it trapped companies. Poclain couldn't reduce its workforce, couldn't cut costs fast enough, and the bills kept coming. Pierre Bataille faced a nightmare scenario. The company was bleeding money, the government wouldn't let him restructure, and he couldn't sell shares to raise capital because the government blocked that too. They controlled who could buy major stakes in French industrial companies. 1974, 1975, 1976, the crisis deepened. Poclain was still building excavators, the products were still good. The EC1000 was the largest hydraulic excavator in the world, but good products don't matter if you can't afford to keep the factories running. Pierre Bataille spent those years trying everything, negotiating with banks, pleading with government officials, looking for partners who could inject capital without taking control. He wasn't trying to get rich, he was trying to save the family company his father had built. And then he found a solution, or a company that looked like a solution. Tenneco, an American conglomerate, massive, diversified, and they owned a construction equipment division called J.I. Case. Case wanted to expand into the European market. They didn't have a strong excavator line. They needed European manufacturing capacity and distribution networks. Poclain had all of that. 1977, Pierre Bataille signed the deal. Tenneco took a 40% stake in Poclain, capital injection, enough to keep the company operating. Pierre Bataille and the family retained 60%, majority control. They could still run the business, make decisions, keep the Poclain name alive. Except, it didn't work out that way. Case didn't just want to distribute Poclain excavators in America. They wanted management control. They wanted to integrate Poclain into their existing operations, consolidate production, streamline the product lines. By 1981, Case increased their stake. 1985, they became the majority shareholder, 98.7% by 1987. The Bataille family lost Poclain. Workers at Le Plessis-Belleville watched the red paint schemes gradually change to Case yellow and black. The Poclain name stayed on the machines for a while, Case Poclain, a hyphenated identity, but everyone knew what it meant. The excavators kept getting built, the factories kept running, but the company that George Bataille had started in 1927, that was gone. Pierre Bataille was devastated, not just financially. This was the family business, his father's legacy, and he'd lost it. But there was one thing he hadn't lost yet: the hydraulics division. Back in 1976, before everything fell apart, Pierre had established Poclain Hydraulics as a separate entity, a formal division within the company, but with its own leadership, its own facilities, its own focus. The hydraulic motors, pumps, and valves that Claude had pioneered, the G0, G1, G2 motors, the technology that made Poclain excavators work, that division was producing components for dozens of applications beyond excavators: industrial equipment, agricultural machinery, material handlers. When Case took over Poclain, the deal included the excavator division, the factories, the product lines, the name. But Pierre Bataille negotiated to keep one thing out of the deal: Poclain Hydraulics. It wasn't entirely his decision. Case wasn't particularly interested in the hydraulics component business. They built excavators. They needed the excavator expertise, not the component manufacturing. So Pierre Bataille, his brother Claude, and their families held on to that division. It was still officially part of Poclain, which meant it was still technically owned by Case, but there was a pathway. Pierre Bataille began the buyback.
August 13th, 1985. Pierre Bataille signed the papers. Poclain Hydraulics was independent, privately owned, severed from the parent company that Case had absorbed. It cost him everything he had left, every bit of capital, every financial favor he could call in. His brother Claude supported him. His son Laurent joined the effort. But this was Pierre's fight. His father had built Poclain from nothing. Pierre had lost most of it. He was determined not to lose it all. The hydraulics business in 1985 was small, 15 million euros in annual turnover, about 150 employees, one factory in Verberie, France, making the large motors, one factory in Czech Republic making smaller motors, a handful of distributors. But they had the technology. The G4 hydraulic motor, launched in 1984, was the most advanced PAM lobe motor ever built. High torque, low speed, compact design, brutal reliability. That motor could run for thousands of hours in the worst conditions imaginable: mines, construction sites, agricultural equipment operating in mud, dust, heat, cold. The big question: could Poclain Hydraulics survive as an independent company? The excavator business was gone. The Poclain name on construction equipment was now Case's property. Pierre Bataille couldn't even use his family's own company name on marketing materials without permission. For years, Poclain Hydraulics operated as a component supplier without the Poclain name on their letterhead. But they had customers: equipment manufacturers who needed hydraulic motors for mobile machinery, companies building wheel loaders, agricultural tractors, material handlers, forest equipment. Those companies didn't care about corporate drama. They cared whether the motors worked. And Poclain hydraulic motors, they worked. The late 1980s were brutal. The Czech factory was producing motors under license, but quality control was inconsistent. The Verberie factory had aging equipment. Competition from American and Japanese manufacturers was intense. Pierre Bataille was running a company that was technically solvent, but with razor-thin margins and no room for error. Laurent Bataille, Pierre's son, became general manager in 1985. New leadership, new energy. Laurent understood that Poclain Hydraulics needed to do two things simultaneously: maintain quality and expand markets. The 1990s brought changes. The Berlin Wall fell in 1989. Eastern Europe opened up. The Czech factory, which had been operating behind the Iron Curtain, suddenly had access to Western markets and capital. Poclain Hydraulics could invest in modernization, new machine tools, better quality control systems. By 2000, Poclain Hydraulics opened a factory in Yorkville, South Carolina. The American market needed local production. Customers wanted faster delivery, local support, American-made components. The Yorkville facility started machining MS motors, 4 sizes, growing production capacity year by year. Meanwhile, back in France, the Czech factory hit a milestone in 2002. The 100,000th motor rolled off the production line. Small motors, compact motors, high-volume production. By 2007, 500,000 motors. By 2023, 2 million motors.
2 million small hydraulic motors from one factory. The Verberie facility in France produced the large motors. By 2006, the millionth MS motor. Different production volume, but these were the big units, the high torque motors that powered the largest equipment. Laurent Bataille became president in 2002 when his father, Pierre, stepped back. The company had survived. Not just survived, grown. 100 distributors worldwide, 10 sales subsidiaries, 3 production sites. Annual turnover climbing steadily. But there was still unfinished business. The Poclain name. Case held the rights since 1977 when Tenneco bought the 40% stake. Every year, Poclain Hydraulics operated without being able to officially call itself Poclain. 2012, Pierre Bataille, now in his 80s, negotiated the final piece of the puzzle. Case, by then part of CNH Industrial after mergers and acquisitions, agreed to sell the name back. Poclain Hydraulics reacquired the Poclain name, 85 years after Georges Bataille named his workshop after a flax pond in the French countryside. The family had the name back. The company officially became Poclain SAS in 2015. Today, Poclain employs 2,100 people worldwide. Annual turnover, 508 million euros. 80% exported. 10 production sites. 8 research centers. 16 sales subsidiaries. 200 distributor partners across 3 continents. They're not building excavators anymore. That business lives on as part of Case, which merged with New Holland, which became CNH Industrial. You can still find old Poclain excavators working in scrapyards and construction sites, the TY-45 especially. 30,000 were built. Some are still running 50 years later. But Poclain Hydraulics, they're building the motors that power modern equipment. Wheel loaders, agricultural tractors, mining trucks, industrial material handlers, forest equipment. And they're developing electric drive systems, electro-hydraulic transmissions, the next generation of mobile equipment power. The technology Claude Bataille invented in 1958 with the G0 motor evolved through the G1, G2, G3, G4 generations, and now the EVWB motors, high-efficiency, variable output motors that reduce energy consumption by up to 30% while increasing power output. The irony is profound. The Excavator division that made Poclain famous, it's gone. Absorbed into Case. The machines still get built, but they don't carry the Poclain name anymore. But the technology that made those excavators work, that survived. That's still independent, still family-owned, still innovating.
There's a museum in Crépy-en-Valois, France, about 10 kilometers from Le Plessis-Belleville, the Fondation Poclain, a foundation dedicated to preserving the history of the company and the machines that bore the name. Walk through that museum and you'll see the progression. The early TU models, the strange, wonderful TY-45 with its 3-wheel undercarriage, larger tracked excavators, the massive EC-1000, or at least photographs and scale models of it. You'll see hydraulic motors cut in half, showing the internal cam lobe design, the radial pistons, the elegant simplicity of a system that can generate hundreds of thousands of Newton meters of torque in a package small enough to fit in a wheel hub. The museum tells the story of innovation, of a farmer engineer who saw a problem and built a solution, of sons who inherited not just a business, but a way of thinking about engineering challenges. But it also tells a harder story, the story of what happens when global economics collide with family businesses, when government policy, oil embargoes, and corporate consolidation strip away control from the people who built something from nothing. Georges Bataille died in 1967, before the crisis hit. He saw his company become successful. He saw his sons take it further than he probably imagined possible. He saw Poclain excavators working on every continent. He didn't see the collapse. Pierre Bataille carried that burden, losing the company, fighting to save part of it,
spending decades rebuilding what had been lost. When he finally reacquired the Poclain name in 2012, he was in his 80s, an old man reclaiming his father's legacy. He passed away a few years later. Today, the Poclain Group is run by the third and fourth generations, Laurent Bataille, then his brothers Guillaume and Jérôme. Now their children are entering the business. Over 100 years of continuity, through wars, economic crises, technological revolutions, and corporate takeovers. The excavators themselves left a legacy that's hard to quantify. The TY-45 changed how contractors thought about job site mobility. Those strange three-wheeled machines proved that excavators didn't need to be tracked monsters that tore up streets. They could be nimble, maneuverable, practical for urban construction. The EC1000 proved that hydraulics could scale to compete with cable excavators. Mining companies had doubted whether hydraulic systems could generate enough force for large-scale operations. Poclain proved them wrong, and once the technology was proven, every major manufacturer followed. Today, you can't buy a new cable excavator. They don't exist anymore. Every modern excavator, from the smallest Mini X to the largest mining shovel, uses hydraulic control. That change, Poclain drove that change. The hydraulic motors themselves changed mobile equipment forever. Before the G0, hydraulic motors were considered unreliable, too much leakage, too much wear, too much maintenance. Claude Bataille's cam lobe design fixed those problems, and once fixed, hydraulic drive systems became the standard for equipment that needed high torque at variable speeds. Wheel loaders, agricultural tractors, forest equipment, material handlers, all of them use hydraulic motors descended from the technology Poclain pioneered. The specific designs have evolved, patents expired, competitors developed their own versions, but the fundamental concepts, those came from a workshop in France, where an engineer named Claude Bataille decided that radial piston motors could be made reliable if the cam lobe was shaped correctly. In the broader history of construction equipment, Poclain is a footnote now. Most people in the industry know Case, Caterpillar, Komatsu, John Deere, Volvo, the big names. But talk to old equipment operators, they remember Poclain. They remember the TY-45, how strange it looked, how well it worked. They remember the high-pressure hydraulic systems, how Poclain excavators could dig through coral rock in Florida when other machines broke apart, how the hydraulics gave you fingertip control even on the largest machines. And if you talk to hydraulic engineers, they know Poclain, because the hydraulic motors are still the benchmark. Competitors measure their products against Poclain's torque density, efficiency, and reliability. There's a lesson in the Poclain story that goes beyond engineering. It's about what innovation costs, what it takes to build something that changes an industry, and what it takes to survive when the world decides to punish you for doing everything right. Georges Bataille innovated because he saw farmers struggling with inadequate equipment. Pierre and Claude Bataille innovated because they saw contractors struggling with cable excavators. They built better machines. They sold them worldwide. They employed thousands of people. And then an oil embargo triggered a recession that wasn't their fault. Government policies prevented them from restructuring, and they lost control of the company. The family fought back. They saved what they could. They rebuilt. And today, Poclain Hydraulics is thriving, independent, family-owned, innovating in electro-hydraulic systems and electric drive technology for the next generation of mobile equipment. But the excavator division? That's gone. Those red machines with the Poclain name, they became yellow Case machines, then orange Case Poclain machines. Then they were absorbed into CNH Industrial's product lines. The Poclain name on excavators existed for about 70 years, 1927 to the late 1990s, not even a full century. But the technology, that's still here, still evolving, still driving equipment on 6 continents. Somewhere right now, a hydraulic motor designed by engineers at Poclain Hydraulics is turning a wheel on a mining truck in Australia, or powering a slewing mechanism on a material handler in Germany, or driving a wheel loader in Brazil. The name might not be visible, The company might not get the recognition, but the technology, that's everywhere. That flax pond near Les Plessis-Belleville, it's still there, just a muddy spot in the French countryside. Most people drive past without noticing. But Poclain, that name ended up on machines that moved mountains. And in the end, maybe that's enough.